Hey guys, today I'm trying out Trailmakers for the first time and I want to try making a cyclocopter. Now it's pretty similar to a helicopter, but it has blades that are pointing outward rather than a blade that spins above the helicopter. Now it has some neat advantages which I'll touch on throughout the video, so let's get right into it. So I'm just starting out here in the sandbox, and you can see the first thing I'm doing is putting down some of these large blocks. Now if you're unfamiliar with this game, the building style sort of works like Legos. As you put stuff on top of other things, you'll see these green joints light up, and those are the points you're directly attaching to. Now it might seem kind of limiting, but it actually ends up being pretty easy to attach stuff to, and I find it's pretty good. Now you'll notice here I'm actually deleting the block you just put down, and that's so I could turn on mirror mode. Now mirror mode does pretty much what you think, it just mirrors the left and the right side. So what I put down to the left puts down to the right, and that's just gonna make it really easy in this case, because as I build the right wing, the left one's automatically gonna build as well, and I won't have to worry about it. So I'm just starting out looking for a power source, and this helicopter engine is, in my opinion, probably the most interesting. Now I need it for this build, because what it does is when I tell it to, it spins up the outside ring, and that I guess you're supposed to attach some blades to make a helicopter with, but I'm using it for a slightly different purpose. Now after I got that all attached up to the body, I'm also putting down the ship wheel. Now I could have used any of these controllers, but I decided on the ship wheel because I thought it was kind of funny. So I put that down there, and you'll see now when I go up into the test mode, just have to walk up to it, hit F, and I'm on it now. And now when I try to spin it up, you can see here, the helicopter engines have a lot of torque. I've never seen a game really account for that before, which is pretty interesting. So I was hoping with this amount of power, I would be able to get this done. So starting out here, you can see I'm putting down some blocks on the very edge of the helicopter engine. And on these, I was looking for something to put down that was like a wing, and the first thing I saw was this wedge. And I don't know, it seemed like it was gonna be good enough, so slapped it on there. And you'll see the orientation I'm putting it down is so that the inside is the slope part and the outside is the flat part. And on the bottom, I'm gonna do the exact same thing, having the inside be the slope part, but you can see it's facing the other direction there. And this is the very beginning of the cyclocopter. So if I get on it and try to spin it up, you'll notice that I'm not getting into the air. And that's for a very good reason. Now, the way I have these two plates mounted, they are producing lift as they spin around, but they're directly opposing each other, so I get no net force in any direction. In fact, the only force I'm producing is one pulling the wheel apart. So to start to get this to actually produce some lift, what I wanted to do is put down a rotating servo like this, and what I'm looking for specifically is something that acts like a bearing. I want something that will freely rotate in any direction, independent of any control I'm putting in, and if I attach this to a mechanical linkage, you'll see I'm able to tilt the blades up and down a little bit to produce a different amount of force at different points in the rotation. So this rotating servo I put on here, you'll notice it gets locked in one direction or the other, and that's not good. That means that it's not gonna be able to fully rotate around, so what I did is put down this continually rotating servo. You'll see it's able to continuously rotate in any direction, so it should work for this. You'll also notice I'm deleting these wedges I have, and I'm replacing them with these modular wings. Now, I'm only doing this because I figured that the modular wings, since they're literally wings, are probably gonna produce more force than the flat wedges. So you can see what I'm doing here is putting down a few of these wings, and I actually decided on just two. So I had to give it a try here just for fun, and you can see it's still not getting off the ground. It's for the same reasons I said before. So now what I wanted to do is actually start to get this to move. So I deleted the two inner wings and replacing them with these two rotating servos. Now I want them to freely rotate in any direction, and I should actually be pretty close if this works. So I put those two on here, and you can see it's not quite working. It gets off the ground by just pure luck. The main problem is that these servos are holding the wings in the direction that they set them to, and they aren't letting them just swivel freely. So I actually replaced them with these helicopter engines, and surprisingly, these were the best bearings I could find. So the helicopter engines will of course spin up when I tell them to, but if I stop telling them to spin, they don't just stop, because that, that'd be really bad if a helicopter just randomly stopped. So instead, they just sort of freely rotate, and I can abuse this to create a bearing. And now giving it a test as I spin it up a little bit, you can see these blades on the ends are just freely spinning back and forth. I'm not driving them at all, and that's exactly what I want to be seeing. So now that I had the bearing situation sort of sorted, what I wanted to do next was move these blades out further from the center of rotation so they get a lot more airspeed as they rotate around. You can see there exactly how much I expanded it out. So you can see, giving it a test, it's mostly working, but you can also know that the center is rotating a lot as well. Now this is a problem I'm going to solve in a little bit, but basically as the helicopter engines rotate, they're spinning the middle almost as much as they're spinning the outside, which is of course not that useful. Now I also put down some gimbal jets on the outside here, and these are useful just temporarily so that I can get myself off the ground, so I could do a few tests while I'm actually in the air instead of just hovering on the ground. And with that looking good, the next thing I wanted to do is add on some pistons, and these are for the center swash plate mechanism. Now all the swash plate is going to be is a helicopter engine that's able to be moved up and down using two sets of pistons. Now this first piston I'm putting in here, you can see is going to move it up and down, and once I got it roughly in the position I want, you can see here in this test I'm able to move move it up and down, and it's a little slow, but otherwise looked pretty good. So I just increased the speed to the max. You can see here it's moving up and down really fast. So I put it at 10, which seemed like a good medium. And after that, you can see here I'm putting down some more blocks on the edge of this piston, and these are for another piston that's gonna move side to side. So I just put this in place as well and give it the same settings. But I noticed something interesting. I tried setting the start position to be 50%, but this didn't work. You can see here in the editor, they always start out fully expanded. Now in the actual game, you can see here they start out at 50%, which is good. You can see here it's right in the middle, but that means in the editor, it's gonna be off center and it's gonna make building really difficult. So just trying to give it a test here to see how it moves. You can see I'm able to move it side to side and up and down. So that looks good. And you can see here I'm putting in a hinge at the very top of the blade, and I'm gonna use my swash plate mechanism to adjust the angle that this hinge is rotated at. And by adjusting this angle, I should be able to connect it directly to the blades and have it adjust the angle that the blades are rotated at. Now I was kind of tired of this thing being right on the ground, so I built this large structure to hold it up. And you can see now as I try to rotate it, it is sort of working, but not very well. You can see just a lot of issues, like the ball joint coming out of its socket, it doing this, and also the center engine being pulled up and down really, really harshly. So what I did is actually deleted the hinge I had up there, and I put in an engine like this. Now this engine's gonna be able to tilt up and down. It's not gonna fully rotate, but it's just gonna tilt up and down with the hinge on it, and this should allow the hinge to be a little bit better. So after attaching the hinge up like this, it seemed to be a little bit better, and actually I was sort of getting the motion I wanted. You can see here how this arm is being pulled in a little bit, and if I rotate to the other side, you can see here how it's being pushed out a little bit. And that means I should be able to get a difference in the tilt I get during the top and bottom parts of the rotation. Now, pretty much the only reason the swash plate wasn't working at this point was the fact that it wasn't starting right in the middle, it was starting at the extreme. So use an extra piston on each of the axes, and once I did that, once I have the helicopter engine down, in the editor, it's gonna start in the middle, but I'll still be able to move the entire engine up and down, and that'll allow me to make this work. So I got that placed there on the X, and here you can see I'm also placing that for the Y axis. And to prevent a collision, I actually had to delete a block and replace it with one of these flat connectors. Now these connectors seem to have no collision at all, so once I have it all hooked up like this, you can see here, I'm able to move it side to side, and I'm able to move the engine up and down. So I should be able to use this and connect it right up to those hinges to get this to work. So exactly what I'm doing here, connecting it right up to the hinges. And you can see once I get that linkage arm put in place, as I try to move it side to side, it actually isn't getting hung up too badly. Sometimes if I move it too far to the one side, it will get hung up, but you can see in this test, it's actually able to pinch in the center arm and expand it out a little bit on the bottom. So with that looking good, wanted to hook it directly up to the blades and see how it worked. And it was sort of working, but not exactly the way I'd want. So you can see here, it actually gets pulled in on the one side and pushed out on the other side. And this is interesting, but it's not exactly what I want. I want the blades to tilt on the axis of rotation. I don't want them to do that. So to fix that problem, I just have to rotate the entire helicopter engine that I have up on the top. Once I do that, I also need to move over the hinge a little bit, then just need to reconstruct the linkage arm to get it connect up correctly. But once I have that there, wanted to give it a test now, and finally it actually was working. You can see here, I'm able to spin it all the way around, it's not getting hung up at all. And you can see here on the bottom, this part's tilted slightly back, and you can see on the top, this part's tilted slightly back as well. So that motion is exactly what I'm gonna need to get this off the ground. So here, giving it a test, it didn't work out too well. Actually, it didn't have enough thrust at all. So to start fixing that problem, I wanted to connect up the bottom set of blades to this mechanism as well, so it would also follow the same thing. And once I put that all in place here, wanted to give it a test, and at first it looked pretty good. And then it did this. And I wasn't really sure what happened here. So I went back into the editor, deleted the blades, and it wasn't freaking out, but I noticed an immediate problem. So see how these things are sort of teetering back and forth a little bit? That's actually really bad. They should be able to freely rotate no matter how the center block is put in place. And that, I figured, is probably contributing to a lot of the problems, since there's a lot of tension in the system. Now, the reason they're sort of teetering like this is I need an extra degree of freedom, allowing the linkage arm to move side to side from where this hinge is located. So to get that motion to work, I wanted to put in a suspension like this, and it completely killed the suspension, so I had no stiffness and just the tiniest amount of dampening to maybe prevent any glitches. And you can see here, as I move up and down, I'm no longer getting that tension. That's because that suspension block's stretching out a little bit. It's not allowing the linkage arm to rotate at all, it's just allowing it to push out a little bit, and that completely solves that problem. And putting back on the blades, it is much better. It's still not perfect. It's still a little bit glitchy. It's much better. And you can see here in the still, the top blade is actually tilted up a little bit, while the bottom one's perfectly flat. And that difference in tilt is going to create a net force force upward, and that's what's gonna allow this to work. So I deleted the massive bug-like legs because I didn't need them anymore. So now giving it a test, you can see here as I hit control, it starts spinning up, but it's actually the middle that spins up, and the arms only spin up a little bit. So what I want to do is create a system to stop the middle from rotating. And to do that, I'm putting down 2 helicopter engines, and these are acting purely as reaction wheels to stop the center from rotating. And you can see here, it works pretty well. Now it's completely uncontrolled. It's just basically based off the fact that it spins at roughly the same rate as the helicopter engines on the outside, but the center is sort of stable. So to get it to be perfectly stable, what I wanted to do is add in a couple of these angle sensors, and I'm putting them on the outside now. And what these are going to do is automatically detect when it tilts too far back or forward, and then once it sees that, it's going to rotate a helicopter engine to create a little bit of torque to counteract that motion. So I had the helicopter engine put on now. After I just tell the angle sensor to start moving it, I actually mirrored this to the other side as well, and now you can see that the center body of this is being held at pretty much a fixed angle, just slightly tilted forward, and this is exactly what I'm going to need. So with the stability looking good, I wanted to add on some more blades and finally see if this thing could get itself off the ground. So after adding some blades onto the middle, I also added some onto the outside just to give it a little bit more force, and after spawning it in, it glitched out once again. So this glitchy problem isn't quite fixed yet, and I was gonna need to do a little bit more to get it fixed. Now I actually realized I could use some tubes to connect the left and right propellers together, and once I did this, I wasn't sure it was gonna happen. I thought maybe it would help things out a little bit, but it really made a difference. So after getting the bottom set of tubes hooked up as well, spawned it in, and you can see here, it's not glitching out at all. And in fact, when I try to launch myself into the air, it seems to be working out just fine. So I'm not sure what was wrong with Trailmakers, but at least I had a solution for that. After expanding out the blades a little bit more, you can see I'm just barely not able to gain height. I'm slowly drifting down. So to fix this problem, I increased the speed of the helicopter engines, and now trying to get off the ground, you can see that these blades are much faster. They are really going for it. And in fact, here when I shut off my gimbal thrusters, for the first time ever, it's actually staying in the air. So with that looking good, there's only a couple more controls I wanted to add in, and one of them is another stability control. Now I noticed this thing was tilting slightly to the side like this when I was trying to move, and I added in this control to hopefully correct for that. Now at first here, you can see I'm actually tilting it in the wrong direction. So after realizing that I reversed the controls, I actually managed to get myself to be flat again, and that should be good enough to get myself to move in any direction I want. And this system was kind of annoying to control, and I realized I was never manually going to need to do this. So I just set 2 angle sensors down, and they automatically rotate the engine to spin it up in one direction or the other to correct for this rotation. So after hooking those up here, I wanted to give it a quick test, and I can't steer this in any direction, but you can see I'm able to move it forward and back and up and down, and with just that, I'm actually getting some pretty cool movement here. I just barely missed that mountain. I'm not sure how, but honestly, it was looking really good at this point, and all that was left to do is add in some steering. Now I used some logic gates here. The logic's a little bit messy in this game, so I don't want to get into it too much, but basically what this logic does is make one side have slightly more forwards power than the other side, and this causes a rotational moment, and you can see here as I try to move it, it works. It's actually way too powerful, and it completely spins me out of control, but after correcting for it a little bit, you can see here I'm able to just pivot to the one side and then pivot right back, and that should be all the controls I need to get this to go. So you can see here, just for some final touches, I ended up painting it. I also added some legs to get it off the ground, and this allows me to completely forget about those gimbal jets, and I can just use the power of the blades to get off the ground. And just to show this thing off a little bit, made a quick montage here. So guys, thanks for watching. This was definitely a fun video to make. Trailmakers seems like a pretty solid game, and I'm excited to see what else I can make in it. So if you have any cool ideas, let me know down in the comments below. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Like the video and all that other stuff. And otherwise, until next time.